Marine Reacts to the Dreadnoughts, Part 2A by Luetin09. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure they check them out. Now, I just recently rewatched the Part 1B, that way I can get a little bit of the information back, refresh my memory before going on to this one. So let's go ahead and get started and jump right into it. But before we do, don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me out a lot. Hit that notification bell right there. You get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes I upload twice a day, typically working on them in the mornings, and then releasing them in the late afternoon to late evening. That way when you all get off work, you can enjoy the videos at your leisure. So, let's go ahead and see what else about the Dreadnoughts we can find out.
For many years after the early...
Okay, first off, I think it happened with the first video where I had to cut out some of that music because the music itself was being claimed. So if that does happen, just know that part's going to be muted. If it doesn't, I'll leave it in.
Early establishment of the Dreadnoughts, they remained still absent from any involvement during the period of scouring traitor chaos Astartes that followed in the wake of the heresy. Titan was still missing, and instead the Dreadnoughts, in the fashion of the ever-reserved Nathaniel Garrow, would bide their time, strengthening their minds, training, and above all else, perfecting their skills of demon hunting and powerful psychic domination, maintaining the singular goal that when they would re-emerge, they would be ready to unleash a wave of vengeance in the name of the Emperor. The abhorrent demons of the warp would greatly regret their expulsions into the material realm. Also, as we well know, time in warp space is not that of time in real space, and this was why when Titan did finally re-emerge from the warp only a few standard years after its disappearance, the Dreadnoughts stood ready, not with a few hundred ultra-elite psychic demon hunting chaos ruining Astartes as might have been expected. Now they returned to reality with at least 1,000 of the strongest warriors created at this time. Malcador's 8 had delivered a force of unrivaled power to counter and bring down a great vengeance upon those who sought to destroy them. The Inquisition itself was also now well established by the Mortal Lords, who were also selected by Malcador and had long awaited the return of Titan and the 8 Knights. And so when it returned, they travelled to meet with Grandmaster Janus and discuss their future cooperation, as well as to discuss and update their contemporary achievements. The Dreadnoughts would now quickly begin to put into practice their perfectly executed training, for many Imperial worlds would soon carry records of mythical Silver Angel warriors descending from the stars and destroying, rending, impaling and banishing creatures of their nightmares back into the darkness from whence they came. The Dreadnoughts fight an endless war wherever the entities and gods of the warp dare to appear, and now more than ever in the dark times of the current age, where the Dreadnoughts face an almost insurmountable task even by their own high standards, and as many Imperial forces find themselves stretched more thinly than ever before. They, though, are masters of psychic power, even beyond fellow Space Marine librarians, and most certainly beyond ordinary human psychers, who are just as likely to be found in a shattered mental state with their fingers embedded in their own faces, tearing their flesh off in acts of corrupted insanity, as their lack of knowledge and subsequent corruption of the warp finally takes hold, and they quickly lose all sense of reality. In distinct opposition to these uncontrolled...
Real quick on a side note, I kind of rewatched the Astartes fan film, so that way, because I feel like if I would have been able to pick up a few more things, and I didn't realize that the person who was doing the little chant or incantation or something, the one who looks like he had dreadlocks, was that he actually had the sigil, like the sigil of the Inquisition on his back. And when people said that that's when he was getting possessed, and then that's why they killed him, I honestly didn't even know who the person was. I just kind of thought he was right there, and he was just kind of like chilling, doing his own thing, and that the Marines were just keeping an eye on them. But turns out he was part of the Inquisition.
Amateur psychers, a Grey Knight, unlike almost all other humans, Astartes included, they will stare with no sense of fear or foreboding far into the abyss and see what stares back at them. Most Astartes chapters after the second founding had greatly reduced numbers, but even by these wing-clipped standards, the Grey Knights still have a comparatively minimal amount of warriors within their ranks. For the Grey Knights though, this is of little consequence, because for them, they are the masters of all. They can take on numbers of enemy unthinkable to others, and there are few enemy who could hope to even have a moderate chance to damage or best a Grey Knight in combat, such as...
Real quick question, what, if it's possible, or if it's known, what is the highest number that a single Grey Marine, or not Grey Marine, a Grey Knight has actually faced? Like, is there a record of it? Is there just a presumptuous number that, hey, they can take on, like, say, 100 demons, 1,000 demons by themselves? Just to, I guess, kind of put things in perspective. I mean, I'm sure they can do an insane amount of damage, but just getting, like, a number can really help, like, put a picture in my mind, in a sense.
Their elite level of skill beyond the norm. But at the same time, this doesn't mean that they are not able to be beaten or subdued. They could be suppressed, they could be overwhelmed by sheer volume of numbers, or other tactical reasons could dictate their necessity to retreat, or even in rare cases be captured. Now, similarly to some other mythical forces within the Imperium who are rarely seen or spoken of, the Grey Knights seem to appear usually unexpectedly, and then only in the most dire of situations. The more day-to-day investigations and administrations are carried out by the Inquisitor's human operatives. The Grey Knights' war is one waged with extreme and unmitigated prejudice, but also a war that is waged in extreme secrecy. For despite the quite open, visible and even tangible horrors of the heresy itself, the true nature, threat and extent of the Chaos Gods is still largely hidden from ordinary citizens in the Imperium. But then again, so are Grey Knights themselves, and it's worth remembering on many worlds Space Marines are often rarely seen also. The more elite the forces within the Imperium, the smaller resonance they have throughout Imperial society, and often the more mythical they are to its citizens. The Grey Knights are a force rarely even whispered about, and certainly not by name, and are all but unknown outside of the Inquisition and authorised Imperial personnel. Forget about citizens, many Imperial officers would barely entertain such a powerful and elite force to exist, even with their devout faith in the Emperor and the Imperial state.
So a lot of people don't even know that they exist. I thought... unless you saw them in passing, or maybe the rumors or legend, but I was under the impression that they were pretty well known. But then when I started hearing more secretive, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe they're well known, but you don't know exactly what they do or what they're capable of.
Many citizens will be likely inclined to believe these Grey Knights are more simply a heavily guarded militant wing of the Inquisition, which to one degree or another they are. But any or all suspicion of such a force is rare in the extreme among the Imperial citizenry, and this is largely down to the fact that any citizens who have witnessed Grey Knights will either be killed or mind-wiped. An interesting and lesser-known aspect of the Grey Knight's psychic abilities is that, unusually similarly to Orcs, the more Grey Knights that are physically present in combat, the more they can pull their combined psychic awareness to manifest powers. Each knight is trained to use these powerful abilities that allow them to use either defensive wards or offensive sorceress spells in combat. Examples of these are the likes of Dark Excommunication, whereby the knight will sever a demon's link with the Chaos God Master, thereby terminating its connection to the warp and leaving it to dissolve into nothing. or something like the fairly simplistic psychic casting of Smite, which allows lightning to leap from the knight's hand and fingers burning and tearing apart any enemies it comes into contact with, or it could be a defensive cast of Shrouding, which blinds a Grey Knight's enemies by sheer strength of faith in the Emperor, drawing power from the warp. This will make the knight become hazy and indistinct to enemies as far away as 20 meters. And then of course you have the aptly named Vortex of Doom, where the knight will tear through real space and warp space alike, condemning any enemy caught within this conflicting vortex into absolute oblivion.
Alright, so I've also been wondering for a while, like I keep hearing Psychers, that they have this power. I've heard that they can shoot lightning. It seemed that from the fan-made film of the Astartes, that the Psychers in there were actually able to create some kind of force field or telekinesis. And now it's saying that they can create a vortex, they can combine them. So the Psyker's abilities, which in my mind immediately goes to like telekinesis, can be very versatile in what their use is. And I wonder if that's dependent based on them learning it, them being born with a specific one, and also as far as them combining it, their power, is this something that has to be compatible? Like, I guess the only thing I can think of is like Dragon Ball Z, right? When they combine into one, is like, do they have to be in some kind of same wavelength, or does it not really matter? But I mean, it's definitely good to know that the Psyker abilities can actually vary as far as their uses. Also, the one where they said like it blinds the enemy, where they can't really see them from up to like 20 meters. So it's very good. That's very versatile.
Within the Inquisition lies a great sense of suspicion around one of the highest honours held by the Grey Knights, that none of their order have ever been corrupted by chaos. This fact, while not disputed, is certainly the subject of discussion among those members of the Inquisition who are so sceptical to this possibility. Some of these individuals find it difficult to believe that any mortal, for want of a better verb, could engage in such sustained and direct contact with the dark entities of the warp and not suffer some form of corruption. There are arguments to be made around the sheer strength of mind of individual Grey Knights, not to mention their onion skin-like approach to defense against the darkness, where layer upon layer of careful preparation both mentally and physically is taken to guard against the chaotic beings of the Immaterium. Not to mention that each Grey Knight's gene seed is imbued with the purity of the Emperor himself. And it's worth noting that obviously the Primarchs were far more meticulously engineered and similarly imbued with the Emperor's spirit, and this didn't save many of them from the corruption of chaos. However, the Primarchs were obviously very different to the Grey Knights. One of the most dangerous pitfalls for humanity in regard to chaos is simple human ambition. And Grey Knights are really devoid of this in the truest sense. They're vessels for the Emperor's will, no more no less. They seek to obliterate his darkest enemies as an instrument of his vengeful spirit. Of course, the most obvious answer is right there in front of you the whole time: the Emperor protects. And if you disagree with this, well, I wouldn't if I were you. It might sound a little heretical, and those inquisitors that you'd have to speak to, I hear, can be unpleasant. The Grey Knight's purity of mind and body is unrivaled, and while other Astartes in their chapters have done their best to preserve their gene seed, it has over time through sheer volume of replication become diluted and impure. Not so for the Grey Knights. Their genetic heritage reaches back unbroken and undiluted to the strength and purity of the Emperor. This untainted gene seed imbuing the knights with the Emperor's spirit, combined with their various other means of purification, creates in each Grey Knight a perfect seal of protection, leading them to be essentially immune to the forces of the void. These knights are the rarest of rare examples of humanity, a singular individual among billions who stands as a bulwark against the endless waves of horror. The Immaterium and its inhabitants can corrupt, twist and destroy the minds and bodies of humans, Inquisitors, Astartes, even their demigod-like fathers, the Primarchs, yet the Grey Knights stand alone as the exception to this.
Alright, so I just want to make sure I heard that right. It's that none of them have ever been corrupted. Now, as far as that goes, you kind of know I'm going to ask already, has there been one? Has there been an instance in one? I wouldn't really think so, though, personally, just right off the bat, just because the training that they go through, the mind wiping and the constant mental fortitude type training, it's very unlikely. But obviously, I always think that, there's always got to be one. And if not, that's great.
Near everything within the Order of the Grey Knights stands separately to that of the more established military orders within the Imperium. Their chapter organisation, though, is more similarly representative of existing Space Marine chapters. They are organised into fighting formations that roughly equate to that of battle companies within a Space Marine chapter, and this constitutes 8 brotherhoods, each one aligned back to the original Knights Errant chosen by Malcador the Sigillite in the establishing days of the Grey Knights. Each of these brotherhoods will be made of around 100 knights, not including officers and senior staff. These brotherhoods will then be subdivided into squads of 10 battle brothers, which can then be split down to 5 as necessary. Beyond this, the Grey Knights operate under their own tactical preferences and using specialised war gear. Each squad will work to establish psychic disciplines so as to best align the psychic harmony between each battle brother, and this is obviously designed to ensure they maximise the synchronised flow of psychic combat between one another, and like any warrior, understand and read those brothers he fights alongside to know their strengths and limitations. Their weaponry will usually be a combination of psychically enhanced weapons, both close quarter and range, and each squad will be led by a Justicer, a knight rank equivalent to that of an Astartes sergeant. Grey Knight leaders, though, must not only be stronger and more tactically experienced, but also be capable of leading his squad in psychic unity, channeling their combined mental strength. No easy task to ask of any psyker, and as such only the most proficient and honoured Grey Knights will rise to take the position of a Justicer. And this also places these individuals in greater peril than any other brothers, as they're the keystone and psychic linchpin of the squad. Grey Knights must be universally proficient with their war gear to allow them to flexibly take on roles using all their available equipment, be that power armour, Terminator armour, force or heavy ranged weapons. There are 4 primary squad roles for Grey Knights. Terminator squads are the core of the chapter. They'll be armed with Storm Bolters, the standard for Terminators, and a specialised psychic close-quarter weapon known as a Nemesis Force weapon. Terminator armour is for the longest time the pinnacle of armour type for a Space Marine. Immune to all but the heaviest of weaponry, both projectile energy and close quarter, these immense suits of armour shield against near all, and within most standard chapters of Astartes, only their first company are usually granted the privilege to wear such rare pieces of Imperium hardware. Not
Wait, so with the Terminator armor, they just said, I believe you just said with other Space Marine chapters, that only the first company is allowed to wear them. So this isn't exclusively for the Grey Knights. And also, on a further note, for the Terminator armor, because I've been hearing that quite a bit, is it something that they place on them, on their body? Or is it something, I know that sounds dumb, or is it something that gets placed around the armor that they already have? And now they're wearing 2 sets of armor? Or is it just the one Terminator armor? Alright, I'm back. I had to go take care of something real quick, so the lighting and everything might be a little different, but let's go ahead and get back into this.
So, for the Grey Knights, they are so important and also such skilled warriors that they possess enough suits of Terminator armor to outfit not just one company, but nearly their entire chapter. While for most Space Marines this armour is an immense gift that can easily turn a battle, for the Grey Knights it is a useful tool to be sure, but it is nothing compared to the skill and strength of the warrior who wears it. For a Grey Knight it requires more than a physical shield to protect against their quarries. These Terminator squads also carry one of the most powerful tools with which to fight the nightmarish entities of the Immaterium Nemesis Force weapons. These uniquely crafted weapons allow the user to channel and focus their psychic powers through the blade and the weapon itself, and this unleashes upon their foes devastatingly powerful psychic strength that can literally eviscerate and cleave demons normally immune to physical impact in two, to shatter and obliterate their warp energy, and are rightly feared by the chaotic creatures of the warp. And it might seem awkward to have to wield such a large melee weapon, because in doing so, surely a Grey Knight would have to sacrifice having, say, a ranged Storm Bolter if you're using a two-hand weapon. Well, not so. For Grey Knights, their Storm Bolters are often mounted on the wrist of their armour, allowing them to wield a powerful Nemesis Force weapon and simultaneously continue to deploy ranged firepower upon the enemy. Now, strike squads, as the name suggests, these are squads used to tactically assault and capture critical locations and objectives. Once inserted into a combat area with teleporters, fast dropships or pods, they are expected to hold their location until a main force is able to link up with them. A strike squad might be used when a, say, demon incursion is just beginning or has struck an Imperial position without any prior warning or suspicion. The principle being to attempt to limit the damage and contain the threat before it spreads and becomes far more serious. They may wear Terminator or more standard power armor, and again utilise a combination of storm bolters, force weapons and even psi cannon. Now the psi cannon is a weapon specifically created by the Imperium to counter the threat of demonic incursions. It resembles a heavy bolter and operates in much the same way, except that it fires psychically charged bolt rounds. Each round will also be ritually inscribed so as to penetrate any warp energized shielding a demon could produce, as well as causing maximum damage and pain to the demon being engaged. Because demonic entities do not move like physical creatures who are affected by gravity, it's necessary for psi cannons to be fired on the move, and while heavy bolters are able to do this when wielded by a space marine, they are less effective due to their namely heavy nature. So a psi cannon uses an anti-gravitic suspensor to offset its weight and allow it to be fired when moving. This does though limit its effective range, and these weapons are used almost exclusively by the agents of the Ordo Malleus. Interceptor squads are basically, as the name suggests, for intercepting enemy on a changing battlefield situation, and they do this by teleporting in a straight visible site-to-site transport using personal backpack teleporters. These are unique to the Grey Knights, as teleportation by the Imperium is not especially common, because they are essentially having to push themselves through warp space. This is a feat only a Grey Knight could hope to achieve and not come out the other side a gibbering broken wreck or worse. They also
Alright, so 2 things. One, the part about them being able to focus their psychic energy into their weapon, it kind of gave me like the Thor vibe. But also, as far as their teleporting, I understand they're having to pull from the warp. I wonder, can they actually just teleport then anywhere? Or is there a certain distance? I would assume anywhere, just because from what how they already would use the warp as far as like transporting ships and all that. But I don't know how exactly. I mean, maybe if they go like a longer distance, it requires more energy, and that's honestly just like a crazy thing to think about. Just having the power of teleportation kind of at your fingertips.
also must do so without any kind of usual protection or Terminator armor, which is too bulky to allow the fitted units to function properly. The process requires immense mental discipline and psychic focus to operate safely, but it provides the Grey Knights with an almost unrivaled strength to attack enemies at positions they're not expecting and literally just intercept them. In one rare example, Justice and Malagante used a personal teleporter to travel from a planet to its moon in pursuit of a demon prince, an achievement few of even the most experienced Grey Knights could hope to replicate given the distance and dangers involved. Lastly, we have the Purgation squads, which are essentially heavy weapons units. While they are essentially the Grey Knights' version of standard Astartes Devastator squads, the weapons they wield are more powerful and often far rarer. They also operate differently, for ordinary Space Marine Devastators bring up the rear of assault while targeting critical, high-value targets with their powerful weapons, but are limited in movement by the bulk of the heavy weapons that they're carrying. Grey Knights' Purgation squads are not allowed this role of backstop. They must maintain the assault alongside their other battle brothers while simultaneously choosing and engaging targets on the battlefield. They utilise the aforementioned psi cannons as well as incinerators, which, like a psi cannon, bear an initial resemblance to the common sibling the heavy flamer, but incinerators however use sanctified promethium in the similar way that psi cannon bolts are inscribed to deal maximum pain and damage to demons. Both of these weapons must not simply be deployed in an arbitrary fashion. The users must have a well-studied knowledge of different warp entities so as to use their weapons to their best effect. Beyond this, Purgation squads are often required to make every expulsion of their ammunition count, as they'll likely be facing superior enemy numbers that could easily overwhelm a non-Grey Knight unit. With that in mind, a Purgation squad will not simply have good weapon skill and knowledge, but will also be able to use the power of their minds to ensure their shots find their targets, regardless of what other battlefield obstructions lie between them and their target. Now this enables them to often achieve shots that appear impossible, firing around obstacles, even around corners, killing enemies who assumed themselves safe from fire. To any non-Grey Knight units who witness such engagements, it can often be perceived as a true expression of the Emperor's will, and only further supports the Grey Knight's belief that they are quite literally weapons of the Emperor himself, an extension of his great spirit onto the battlefields of the Imperium. And while Grey Knights must always be flexible to a role as necessary in the chapter once they take on the role of a Purgation squad, they'll often remain in this position because of the high level of specific focus and skill required to operate successfully within these squads. In addition to the main squad types, there are other variants of Grey Knight known as Purifiers and Paladins. Now, Purifiers are a strange and terrifying selection of individuals. A Purifier is simply the purest of the pure. They are the truest examples that exist of an incorruptible spirit. These are Grey Knights chosen from within the Grey Knights, and while all within the Order are already considered to be essentially incorruptible, these Knights are selected as being even more specifically pure, and because of this there are rarely more than 30 or 40 individuals active at any time within the Order. For the entities of the Warp, this is just as well, because the spiritual strength of these Grey Knights is so powerful that demons literally will wither from their presence. They are a quite literal anathema. The Purifiers also have a sacred duty to maintain the purifying seals and bindings on any demons being held captive by the Grey Knights. They also...
Okay, so I really thought that the Grey Knights, they're so incorruptible and that no one has ever been corrupted is saying something pretty big. But then they go to say that these pure Knights are even more uncorruptible. I mean, it's just really hard to wrap your head around. These guys are essentially, it seems like to me, I guess if you want to put it in some kind of terms of, the Emperor is like, I guess, obviously I know that he's not in their mind, but it could be like these people are like maybe the closest personification of the Emperor if he were still able to move around and whatnot. Man, Grey Knights are something else, man. I'll tell you that right now.
Are able to turn their sheer purity of soul into a weapon against the darkness of the Warp, channeling it through their psychic power to produce expulsions of ethereal fire which will burn out and incinerate the souls of their enemy. While a Grey Knight could serve his order for years and show nothing but pure skill and service without exception, he could still be denied entry as a Purifier, because their standards for acceptance are the extreme of the extreme, and skillful warrior or not, this won't be a qualifying consideration. Paladins, on the other hand, are elite warriors and protectors without comparison. They represent only the most capable and stand-apart knights, which is a strong distinction to make within the Grey Knights, being that they are already some of the most superior warriors in the galaxy. Paladins are in essence the elite warriors of the Grey Knights, and to prove themselves worthy of acceptance, they must not only exhibit exceptional skill and a record of pure service, but they must go beyond and complete 8 sacred quests of increasing challenge. If successful, they'll be granted the honour of becoming a Grey Knight Paladin, and additionally be assigned to one of the Grand Masters as their personal guard. The various quests are designed to test all aspects of the Grey Knight. These include isolation in caverns surrounded by spirits that seek to break the Knight's sanity, and he'll be expected to fight warp-spawned entities whilst wearing no armour, bringing back trophies from Chaos Demon Heralds, and they'll also be expected to hunt down and banish one of the 666 most powerful demons using only a Nemesis Force Sword and the demon's own name against it.
So they don't get any armor whatsoever, only the weapon that they mentioned. And so these guys, the Paladins, are just one step below the actual Grand Master. I think that was the terminology, the leader in a sense. Because I would assume that the leader would be, or the Grandmaster would be the tippy top of the Grey Knights. And these guys, God, I can't even, I don't know how people would be able to do this. But obviously if you're a Grey Knight, you've really been through some of it. But then, even then, to get even higher, it gets worse and worse and worse.
Once the trials are completed, they'll achieve the rank of Paladin, and Paladins will also act as a guard for Grey Knight apothecaries on the battlefield, because the apothecaries, these individuals are critical to the ongoing purity and genetic stability of the Order, and as such they play a vital role for the Grey Knights, and their survival is essential. As with all apothecaries, while they are able to obviously act as medics, their primary role is actually to retrieve the gene seed of fallen space marines. And while this is always a hallowed role for an Astartes, given the genetic link to the Emperor for a Grey Knight, this task is even more critical and honoured. As per the original founding of the Grey Knights, the command structure is made up of 8 Grand Masters who sit on the chapter council, and these will be presided over by the Supreme Grand Master. This system of rule was laid down by, of course, Malcador the Sigillite when the Order was first established. The Supreme Grand Master, while having total authority over the chapter, can only be appointed by a completely unanimous consent by the sitting Grand Masters. The purpose being obviously that it should be as close to impossible for an unsuitable or the most unthinkable situation, a corrupted individual taking over the role. This though would be highly unlikely because the system is designed to ensure that only a fully suitable candidate were able to take on such a powerful position. The Grand Masters themselves usually have little direct command to their subordinates, because the Grey Knights are such a high skill order that most of their general operations are handled without the need for significant oversight. The Grand Masters often play a literal role as well on the battlefield, supporting their brothers or sometimes assisting coordination when one of their demons of special interest makes an incursion to the materium. The Grey Knights are an order enriched by their access to specialist equipment, war gear and armour, and these can be small and individual, standard issue or applied to heavy force multipliers like Dreadnoughts. They also use more strange ritual relics that for them hold powerful strength against warp entities. In addition to war gear already discussed by Grey Knights, they're often equipped with Crusader helms. These are older patterns of helmet that simply give a distinct and knightly appearance, a visual mark of a Grey Knight, very easily identifiable. While many Marines will wear seals on their armour or weapons, those worn by Grey Knights are blessed in complex rituals to preserve their strength and energy. If a warrior is able to return to their homeworld with his seals unbroken, it is a strong mark of skill and respect from other brothers. Oath shields are personal heraldry worn by a Grey Knight, and these are another visually distinctive trait, with the only comparison being the respected houses of the Imperial Knights. Oath shields can also be updated to include elevated standing of achievement within the chapter. Now, the Codicium Aeternum is a book, a dread tome, containing the Grey Knights and also Ordo Malleus's knowledge on many demons the Order have faced and defeated. Strewn across pages of insanity that, to witness this, could easily lose a human mortal their mind, are penned residual information, recorded calculations on where and how these dark entities may manifest and how they can be defeated. For Grey Knights, it's not uncommon for them to use very physical relics of past Grey Knights or martyred devout members of the Imperial cult, and to that end they may use the very blood and bones of past Grey Knights, and this can be seen in various relics or mounted on their armour. These wards are often felt so strongly by demons as to be completely intolerable. For a demon, the psychic energy expelled by such relics penetrates their spirit like nuclear fire, and feel as if their ethereal skin is being stripped away layers at a time by.
So that's why they're wearing. I mean, obviously, I knew it had a deal with warding off demons, but I didn't know the specifics as far as a lot of this stuff that I usually see from time to time that they're always wearing. They're always wearing these little seals with the writing on it. I always knew that it was there for like maybe this kind of reason, but I never knew the exact little specifics. So it's good to know, and also a little description as to what it does to the demons.
By white hot energy. Now, the Liber Demonica is another arcane book containing script from the Librarium Demonica on the Grey Knight's homeworld of Titan, but these books are mounted on a Grey Knight's chestplate and carried into every battle they fight in. The books themselves are powerful psychic talismans, and the spine of each book is carved from the bones of a martyred saint of the Imperial cult. Above all else, they are an icon representing the incorruptible human faith in the Emperor of Mankind, and this in itself is a shivering weapon against the forces of chaos and the warp. The Nemesis banner is soaked in the blood of a dozen Grand Masters, and is one of the Grey Knight's most powerful relics. A heavy tool against the abominations of the warp, its psychic fire burns with such an intensity that demons can barely tolerate its presence. To them, it has extreme psychic radiation, and the nearer it is to them, the more powerful they feel its visceral psychic heat penetrating their spirit and slowly burning them out of existence. Now, Aegis Dreadnoughts are noteworthy simply because they are rarer than ordinary Dreadnoughts. Their armour, as with standard Grey Knight Aegis armour, is more effective at protecting against the demonic entities of the warp. And another interesting point
is the Dreadnought or the Terminator armor somewhat similar, or are they just the same thing and they just have a different name for them? Or are they completely two separate things? And if so, which one is stronger, I guess? Or maybe more versatile? I mean, I understand that they both can have their own specific uses and instances where you would actually wear them. And because from right now, what I can tell, I'm assuming this is the Dreadnought armor. Although it looks like, according to the midsection right here, it doesn't look like his. It looks like he's one of those things that's actually physically attached to it. Like he can't really come out of it. Then again, I'm not 100% sure, but it definitely seems like the Dreadnought's at least bigger than Terminator armor.
Point of note is that unlike other Space Marine chapters who consider consignment to a Dreadnought a high honour to continue in the service of the Emperor, Grey Knights perhaps quite surprisingly consider their dedication and interpretation of the role they play as the extensions of the Emperor himself. They prefer not to be interred in a Dreadnought, but to instead find rest in the dead fields of Titan alongside the greatest of the chapter heroes. For this reason, only the very highest of skilled Grey Knight warriors will be placed inside a Dreadnought, often a Grand Master. Because of this, a Grey Knight Dreadnought may also take on the role of a battlefield commander. And while it's true that Dreadnoughts are nearly always ancient and can bring much wisdom and tactical knowledge to their active brothers on any battlefield, it's not common for them to take a command role, but again, not so in the Grey Knights. Lastly, Dreadknights, and this is a very unusual piece of hardware that is exclusively used by the Grey Knights. It's essentially a powerful exoskeleton to allow a Grey Knight Space Marine to combat the most powerful demons one-on-one. Now these will usually only be required when fighting a greater demon of chaos or a demon prince, who while still ethereal warp creations have massive physical strength. The amazing feature of a Dreadknight is that unlike Dreadnoughts, which are lumbering and slow, a Dreadknight enables its user to fight with much of the agility and skill of a standard Marine or human. Also, instead of their arms and fists being replaced by mounted weapons as per Dreadnoughts, a Dreadknight has much more close replication to standard human appendages, and so they have the ability to grip and use different force weapons, as well as having bolters mounted on their wrist, similarly to ordinarily armoured Grey Knights. This agility is highly necessary, not only for attack and also defense, as unlike a Dreadnought which is very heavily armoured to compensate for its trudging speed, a Dreadnought operator is far more exposed even whilst wearing his own personal armour, so the need to be able to move with more dexterity is very necessary to ensure the user is not simply ripped from the machine and torn asunder. As with most other Astartes,
So they do wear their armor, even though they're inside this other piece of armor. And honestly, out of all of them, the Dreadnought seems like, sure it might, I don't know for sure, but it might be the strongest, but the way they described it, it is slower. I just feel like I would prefer maybe, damn it, I really forgot the name of it. The newest armor that they talked about, the Knight armor. Yeah, either that or the Terminator armor. They seem to be a little more, at least to my style, or what I would want to be my style.
Chapters, the Grey Knights use starships to travel through the galaxy, but unlike most other chapters of Space Marine, they have much more unique adaptation, as is fairly consistent with much of the Grey Knights' hardware. Their ships, for example, are modified with anti-demonic wards, and this gives these ships additional protection while travelling through the warp. Although given the crew complement, it's surprising that demons would even want to go near them. Their ships have more armour and all are equipped with teleportation devices and have upgraded engines as well. They contain larger drop pods to enable heavier deployment of units, and any necessary mortal humans crewing the ship are mind-wiped without exception to reduce any possible chaos corruption. These necessary human crew members also have the fun time of being psychically implanted with a key word that will shut down their nervous system should the vessel be contaminated by chaos, and this would obviously result in their mass simultaneous deaths instantly. Now, why is it that the Grey Knights get all of these specialist technical upgrades? All of these advanced upgrades seem very unusual when you consider the general lack of such a thing throughout Imperial forces. Well, for one thing, the Grey Knights are blessed by their close proximity to Mars, the home forge world of the Mechanicus, and as such this gives them close access to technology not found anywhere else in the Imperium. They're also only able to access this technology because of their extremely powerful position as the militant wing of the Ordo Malleus, which commands authority arguably as powerful as the Emperor himself.
Alright, let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. So, the reason I stopped the video at that specific spot, obviously for the splitting it into two parts, was that I heard that the last section of the 30 minutes is going to be insane, and that's from multiple comments. So wanted to make sure I stopped it at a good point before it started getting good, because then I probably wouldn't want to turn it off. So not a whole lot to say, got a lot of it out during the video. The only thing I did have question of is as far as the pieces of armor went. Now I'm talking about the Terminator, the Dreadnought, and the, I want to say it was called Knight armor. Essentially the exoskeleton armor one. how abundant are these pieces of armor? Are they very few? I mean, if you did mention it, I missed it, or I just completely don't remember it. But it seems like obviously with the Dreadnought armor, it would be very limited, and then it seems like the Terminator armor would be a little more frequent. And with the exoskeleton part, they did say that one was exclusively for the actual Grey Knights, and that the Grey Knights also, as far as the Dreadnought armor goes, wouldn't really want that feeling of being fully integrated into one, whereas in other Space Marine chapters, as he said, would actually prefer that. And also, real quick before I end the video, just wanted to hit on the little thing again as far as, has any Grey Knight been corrupted? That's going to go ahead though and be it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it. It helps me for the channel. If you're curious to see what's coming up next, check the list down below in the description. You're going to see a list of about 5 videos. Top to bottom is going to be how I view them. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.